The morning it happened was perfectly ordinary, the kind of calm that hides disaster behind its silence. I was in Cedar Brook, a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, sitting by the kitchen window, sipping my second cup of coffee, when I saw the wedding announcement on my phone. Not just any wedding, my son's. His name, Ethan Rivers, printed neatly beside a photo of him and the girl I thought was still just his fiancée, Sophie. They were standing under an arch of white roses, the caption reading, "Yesterday was perfect. Officially, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers." My heart dropped so fast I felt it in my stomach. Yesterday. The word hit harder than anything else. Yesterday meant I had been here, at home, waiting for a call that never came. I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake, some photo shoot, maybe a pre-wedding event. So I called him. It rang twice before he answered. His tone was casual, as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, Mom," he said, a little too light, a little too fast. "When's the big day?" I asked, my voice shaking just enough for me to notice. There was a pause. Then, calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he said, we actually got married yesterday." I remember gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Yesterday?" I repeated. "Without telling me?" He chuckled nervously. "It was last minute, Mom, just small. You know, courthouse thing." But I knew it wasn't small. The pictures said otherwise. The floral arch, the expensive photographer, Sophie's designer gown. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, carefully, secretly. And I wasn't supposed to know. For years, I'd been his anchor. After his father passed, it was just the two of us in that small house with creaky floors and too many memories. I worked double shifts as a live-in nanny for a wealthy family, the Davenports, just to pay for his college, his apartment, his dreams. Every cent, every sleepless night was for him. And now he had built a new life, a new family, without even including me. I felt erased. But humiliation didn't hit me all at once. It crept in slow and steady. It came when I realized who told me the truth before he did. Mrs. Davenport, my employer. She'd seen the post too, while scrolling through her phone during breakfast. "Oh, look," she'd said, showing the screen to her daughter. "Isn't that your nanny's son?" "How lovely." The other staff turned their heads, smiling politely, while I stood there frozen, a tray in my hands, pretending to care about pouring tea. The shame burned through me like acid. I didn't just lose my son's trust, I'd lost face in front of the people who paid me to care for their children. That night, when I got home, the silence in my little rented apartment felt louder than ever. His baby photos were still lined up on the shelf. His first soccer trophy, his graduation cap. Every frame felt like a lie. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. He's an adult now, I told myself. He doesn't owe me anything. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the wedding. It was about being left behind, the same way I'd once been left by his father, disappearing into his new life without looking back. Maybe that's why I worked so hard to raise Ethan right, to make sure he'd never treat anyone that way. Still, I needed to understand. So I sent him a message. "Ethan, I'm not angry. I just need to know. Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't reply that night, or the next. Days passed and my messages turned from soft questions to quiet heartbreak. Then one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It wasn't from Ethan, it was from Sophie. "Hi, Mrs. Rivers, I'm sorry things happened this way. It was just better this way for everyone. Better for everyone." I read that line over and over, trying to decode what better meant. Better for her? For Ethan? For their perfect little image without me in the frame? The next morning at the Davenport house, something inside me cracked. Their son, a sweet 6-year-old named Oliver, was having breakfast when he suddenly asked, "Miss Clara, will you come to my mommy and daddy's anniversary party?" His innocent face made me smile, but inside I felt that ache again. The ache of being invited to someone else's celebration when my own child had erased me from his. I nodded, forcing cheer into my voice. "Of course, sweetheart." As I watched the family around their table, laughing, teasing, existing together, it hit me. I'd spent my whole life building homes for others while mine quietly disappeared. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the photo again, Ethan and Sophie, smiling in that white garden, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. My son's new family. My exclusion made official. And then, I noticed something. A face in the corner of the picture. Familiar, too familiar. My heart started racing, because standing just behind Sophie's mother, half hidden by the bouquet, was someone from my past. Someone who shouldn't have been there at all. I zoomed in until the image blurred, my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't believe it. The realization made the betrayal 10 times deeper. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was something much bigger. Something planned. I couldn't sleep after that discovery. The image on my phone glared back at me in the dark. My son's wedding photo, and that familiar face standing behind the guests like a ghost from another life. I knew that woman. Even after 10 years, I'd recognize her anywhere. Margaret Hale. She used to be my employer, my first job as a nanny when Ethan was still a boy. The woman who fired me without warning, who humiliated me in front of her guests, and who told me, "Women like you should know their place." Seeing her at my son's wedding wasn't just strange, it was impossible. Ethan had never met her, or so I thought. I zoomed in again, staring at her smile, that polished, practiced expression she used to wear when scolding the help. The memory hit me like a wave. Her mansion in Lakeview Hills, her perfect garden parties, and me, standing in the background with a tray, pretending her cruelty didn't sting. I remembered the last thing she said to me before I left that job. "You're lucky I'm not telling your son what kind of mother you really are." I never knew what she meant. But now, seeing her at my son's wedding, I realized there was a connection, something hidden that linked my past to Ethan's new life. The next morning, I tried calling Ethan again, straight to voicemail. So I called Sophie. She didn't answer either. I typed a message, "Sophie, I need to ask something. How do you know Margaret Hale?" Hours passed before the 3 little dots appeared and then vanished. No reply. At work, I could barely focus. Mrs. Davenport asked me twice if I was feeling ill. "You're pale as a ghost, Clara," she said, placing her hand on my shoulder. I smiled weakly, muttering something about allergies, but inside I was spinning. During Oliver's nap time, I went out to the garden and searched Margaret Hale on social media. Her page was private, but her daughter's wasn't, and that's when everything made sense. There she was, Sophie Hale, my son's wife, Margaret Hale's daughter. The screen blurred as my eyes filled with tears. All those months of polite smiles, weekend visits, dinners I paid for, and not once did Sophie tell me who her mother was. My pulse throbbed in my ears as the realization sank in. They had known exactly who I was. Sophie had known. Margaret had known. And they'd chosen to keep it a secret. I wasn't excluded from the wedding out of forgetfulness. I was deliberately erased. I dropped my phone, trembling. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The memories rushed in. Margaret's cruel laughter, her words echoing through time. "Some people don't belong in our world, Clara." And now her daughter had married my son. That night, I didn't go home right away. I drove to Lakeview Hills to the old Hale mansion, just to see if it was still there. The place looked the same. Trimmed hedges, iron gates, white columns glowing in the porch lights. My stomach twisted as I sat there in my car, the same model I'd bought secondhand after years of saving. Through the window, I saw shadows moving inside. Laughter, glasses clinking, celebration. Maybe it was a dinner for the newlyweds. Maybe she was toasting to the fact that her daughter had done exactly what she wanted, climbed her way into a better family, and buried me under their secrets. I thought about knocking on the door, demanding answers. But I didn't. Instead, I drove away, shaking, half crying, half furious. On the way home, I stopped at a quiet gas station and sat under the harsh fluorescent lights, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked tired, older, defeated. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" I whispered. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd made up my mind. If they thought they could erase me, I'd show them they couldn't. I pulled out the old box from my closet, the one with Ethan's childhood photos, report cards, and the letter from his late father. I ran my fingers over the old documents, and that's when I saw something I hadn't noticed in years. A letter with the Hale family's crest on the corner, dated 14 years ago. It was a reference letter Margaret Hale had written for me when I left her employment, except it wasn't glowing at all. It was cold, almost cruel. Clara Rivers is emotionally unstable and struggles with boundaries. I cannot in good faith recommend her for further childcare positions. My hands shook. This letter, this piece of paper, could have destroyed my career back then. I didn't understand how I'd still gotten hired by the Davenports. Maybe luck, maybe pity, but now it all connected. Margaret had painted me as unstable, unfit. And Sophie had grown up hearing that story. To her, I wasn't Ethan's hardworking mother. I was the unstable nanny her mother once fired. No wonder she didn't want me at the wedding. The next day, I confronted Ethan at his office. He looked startled when I appeared in the doorway. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I handed him the letter. "You married her," I said quietly. "Margaret Hale's daughter." His face went pale. "How did you—" "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "You knew—" He sighed, glancing around, lowering his voice. "I didn't, not at first. Sophie told me after we got engaged. I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered to me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "That woman ruined my life, Ethan. She tried to destroy me." He rubbed his temples. "Mom, please, don't do this here." But I couldn't stop. Years of sacrifice and silence boiled over. "You got married behind my back because she told you not to invite me, didn't she?" His silence was the answer I didn't want. I felt my knees weaken. "You let her rewrite my story, Ethan. You let her make me the villain." He looked down, ashamed, whispering, "She said you were difficult, that you'd make a scene." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And you believed her." He didn't meet my eyes. I walked out before he could say anything else. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight. Outside, the rain had started, soft at first, then pounding, as if the sky itself wanted to drown out my pain. When I reached my car, I sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel. The humiliation was complete. My own son had been turned against me by the very woman who once destroyed my livelihood. But as I stared out at the rain-smeared city lights, another feeling began to stir. Not sadness, not even anger. Resolve. They thought they'd buried me quietly, that I'd fade away, just another forgotten chapter. But they underestimated how much truth a mother can uncover when she's been silenced for too long. I started the engine, my reflection faint in the windshield, and whispered to myself, if they want to play games, they've chosen the wrong woman. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for my son's love. I was fighting to reclaim my truth. The next few days were a blur of silence, like the whole house had exhaled and forgotten to breathe again. I woke up early, made breakfast as usual, and watched as Samuel avoided me like a stranger. He used to greet me every morning with a sleepy smile and a quick, "Thanks, Mom." Now he'd mumble something under his breath, grab his coffee, and leave before I even finished cooking. Olivia had started staying over more often, her perfume lingering in the air longer than her politeness ever did. She'd strut through the hallway like she already owned the house, wearing my son's shirt, barefoot, humming songs that grated against my nerves. But what hurt most wasn't her arrogance, it was how Samuel looked at her. The same warmth he once reserved for me, he now saved entirely for her. I could feel myself fading into the wallpaper, like one of those forgotten photographs no one remembers to dust. Then came the dinner invitation, if I could even call it that. Olivia approached me in the kitchen one evening, her phone in one hand, nails tapping against the counter like she was counting down the seconds she had to endure my presence. "We're having dinner tomorrow night," she said, not even looking at me. "Samuel wants you to come." The tone said everything. This wasn't a request. It was a test. I almost said no. I should have. But the mother in me, stubborn, hopeful, aching for even the smallest scrap of normalcy, couldn't resist the thought that maybe, just maybe, this dinner could mend something. So I agreed. I even spent the next morning baking Samuel's favorite lemon cake, the one he'd begged for on his 10th birthday. I thought the gesture might remind him of simpler days, when love wasn't so complicated, when mothers weren't treated like intruders in their own family stories. The restaurant was new, sleek, and expensive, the kind of place Olivia loved showing off on her social media. I arrived early, clutching the cake box like a peace offering. The hostess led me to a long glass table near the center, the lights so bright it felt like I was on display. 10 minutes later, Samuel and Olivia arrived. She wore a cream-colored dress and an expression that said she had already won. Samuel looked exhausted but polished, like a man trying too hard to look happy. We sat down. Small talk filled the space between us like static. Olivia complimented her own earrings. Samuel nodded at everything she said, and I tried to catch his eye, just once, but he never met my gaze. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "So," I asked, forcing a smile, "when's the big day? Have you two picked a date yet?" Silence. It was Olivia who finally spoke, her voice honeyed and sharp. "Oh, didn't Samuel tell you?" She leaned closer, as if whispering a secret meant to slice clean through me. "We actually got married yesterday." The world tilted. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. I blinked at Samuel, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding, anything. But he didn't. He just stared at his plate, shoulders tense, jaw tight. "It was small," he said finally, almost apologetically. "Just us." I felt something inside me crack so quietly it was almost dignified. "Just you?" I repeated, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "You got married and you didn't even tell me?" Olivia sighed dramatically, as if my pain was an inconvenience. It wasn't personal, really. We wanted it private. You know how traditional weddings can be, too messy, too emotional. We just wanted something simple. Simple. The word echoed in my head like an insult. My son's entire life, his first steps, his first heartbreak, his graduation had been moments I'd fought to protect and witness. And now his wedding, the moment every mother dreams of, had happened without me. I'd been erased from my own child's story. I stood up before the tears could betray me. The restaurant noise blurred into a distant hum, the laughter of strangers mocking the hollow ache in my chest. I muttered something, maybe an apology, maybe a goodbye, and left. I barely made it outside before I felt my knees buckle. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and white as I leaned against a parked car, struggling to breathe. I didn't even notice that I was still holding the cake box until I looked down and saw the smudge of icing on my trembling fingers. I'd baked that cake for a celebration I was never meant to attend. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me, imagining Samuel there, his laughter echoing softly through the house like a ghost of better days. I wanted to be angry, to hate Olivia, to blame her for everything. But deep down I knew my son had made his choice, and that hurt even more. The next morning I decided I couldn't live in that house anymore. Every corner reminded me of a family that no longer existed. The curtains I'd sewn by hand, the hallway where Samuel's childhood drawings still hung. Everything felt like a museum to a life that had ended without warning. So I packed a single suitcase, wrote Samuel a note, and left my key on the table. I moved into a small apartment across town, a quiet, sunlit place that smelled faintly of lavender and paint. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for anyone else. Still, some nights I'd catch myself setting 2 plates at dinner out of habit, or checking my phone for a message that never came. Weeks passed before I heard from him. One evening, just as I was about to go to bed, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Samuel stood there, his eyes tired, his face thinner than I remembered. He didn't speak right away. He just handed me an envelope. Inside was a single photograph, him and Olivia, dressed in wedding attire, standing under a white arch. She was smiling. He wasn't. "I thought you should have this," he said quietly. I stared at the photo for a long moment. The woman beside him looked radiant, triumphant. My son looked like someone pretending to belong in his own life. I wanted to ask why he did it. Why he shut me out. Why the woman who had given him everything wasn't worthy of witnessing his new beginning. But I didn't. I just nodded. Thank you for bringing it. Worth it. He lowered his head, guilt shadowing his face. I thought I was doing what was right for us, for her. She didn't want a big thing, and I didn't want to argue. I could see the truth in his eyes then. This wasn't strength, it was fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of disappointing me. Fear of standing in the middle and choosing wrong. But he had chosen. And the cost was us. Before he left, he looked around my small apartment, as if memorizing the space. You're doing okay here? I smiled faintly. I'm learning to. He nodded, then turned to leave. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I walked to the table, placed the photo face down, and whispered to the empty room, "You'll always have a home here, even if you never come back." That night, I finally slept. Not peacefully, not completely, but enough. And maybe that's all healing really is. But as I drifted off, I didn't know what storm was still brewing, because the truth about Olivia's marriage and what she'd done to keep Samuel by her side was about to surface. And when it did, everything I thought was lost would suddenly come rushing back. She thought she'd lost her son forever, but the secret Olivia was hiding would change everything. If you've ever been blindsided by the people you trusted most, you'll want to hear what happens next. Don't miss part 4, where the truth behind Olivia's manipulation finally comes to light. Days turned into weeks, and life in my little apartment settled into a quiet kind of ache. I told myself I was healing, that silence could be peace if I learned how to sit inside it long enough. But some nights, when the world went still and the streetlights painted long shadows on my walls, I'd catch myself listening for footsteps that never came. It's strange how even after someone breaks your heart, your soul still waits for their voice at the door. I didn't see Samuel much after that visit. He called once or twice, always quick, always distracted. I knew he wasn't happy. His words were too measured, his tone too careful, like someone constantly walking on broken glass. Still, I didn't pry. I told myself it wasn't my place anymore. Until the call came. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my old neighbor from the estate, Mrs. Grayson, phoned me out of the blue. Her voice carried that hesitant warmth people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "I saw your son yesterday," she said softly. "He looked different. Thin, tired, and dear that wife of his," she paused. "Something isn't right with her. I overheard things I probably shouldn't have." My heart stilled. "What kind of things?" I asked. Mrs. Grayson sighed, lowering her voice as if Olivia might somehow hear through the phone. She was at the salon, boasting to someone about how she made sure Samuel didn't invite you. Said it was better that way, that she didn't want any emotional drama ruining her day. And then she laughed, saying if he ever tried to stand up to her, she had ways to remind him who held the reins. For a moment, the air around me felt too thick to breathe. I clutched the edge of the counter, staring at the faded photo of Samuel on my wall, smiling, carefree, a boy holding his first soccer trophy. The idea that someone could twist that gentle heart into fear, it made something old and fierce rise in me. "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "You did the right thing." When I hung up, my hands were trembling. I wanted to march straight to that house to demand the truth, but I also knew anger wouldn't get through to Samuel, not anymore. Not when someone else's voice was already lodged in his head. That night I couldn't sleep. Every thought circled back to the same question. What did she mean? She had ways to remind him? It wasn't love if control was the language. I needed proof, something I could confront him with. So the next morning, I went back to the house I'd once called home. I told myself it was just to pick up a few old boxes from the attic, but deep down, I knew I was searching for more than forgotten memories. The front gate was slightly open, the garden overgrown, and the windows half drawn. A house no longer cared for, only occupied. When I stepped inside, the air felt different, heavy. The laughter that once filled it had been replaced by a silence that sounded almost rehearsed. I made my way upstairs, each creak of the floorboard sounding like an accusation. In Samuel's study, the scent of his cologne lingered faintly, mixed with something sharp, perfume that wasn't mine. Papers lay scattered across the desk. Bills, letters, a few torn notes. And there, tucked between two books, was a phone. Not Samuel's. A smaller one, rose gold, with a lock screen showing Olivia's reflection caught mid-selfie. I shouldn't have touched it. I knew that. But something in me, the mother who'd been lied to, the woman who'd been erased, couldn't walk away without knowing. I pressed the side button, and to my surprise, the phone unlocked. A flood of messages blinked to life. Most were shallow, photos, shopping lists, trivial updates. But then one thread caught my eye. A conversation with someone saved as L. L. He asked about his mother again. What did you tell him? Olivia. That she made her choice when she left. He doesn't need that guilt now. L. You're sure she doesn't know anything about the account? Olivia. Please? She can barely keep her emotions straight. I'm not letting her ruin this. My pulse pounded in my ears. The account? What account? I scrolled further, my stomach tightening with each word. Let's make sure his name stays secondary. Once the transfer clears, you can fix the paperwork. Olivia. Already handled. He's too trusting to question it. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Money, control, manipulation. She wasn't just isolating him emotionally. She was using him, trapping him. My hands shook as I snapped a photo of the conversation with my own phone. For the first time since all this began, I wasn't just hurt. I was determined. As I turned to leave, I heard the front door open downstairs. Footsteps, then voices. Samuel's voice, low and tired. Olivia's sharp and irritated. Panic surged through me. I slipped the phone back exactly where I found it, my heart hammering. Their voices grew clearer as they moved toward the stairs. I told you I don't want her near the house, Olivia hissed. And I told you she's still my mother, Samuel replied, his voice shaking. You can't keep deciding. Deciding? She cut him off, her tone dripping venom. If I didn't make decisions, you'd still be running to her every time you needed to think. You think she wants what's best for you? She wants control. Same as always. I froze by the study door, the words slicing through me. Samuel didn't answer. The silence stretched so long I thought he might walk away. But then his voice came, small and defeated. Maybe you're right. That was the moment I realized how deep her hold went. She didn't just take his love, she took his confidence, his ability to think for himself. I slipped quietly out the back door, my breath shallow, my mind racing. I didn't know where I was going, but my body led me straight to the only place that made sense. The old park near the estate, where I used to take Samuel as a boy. I sat on the same weathered bench, the one where we'd once shared melted ice cream and silly secrets, and let the tears finally come. I'd lost him once to neglect, and again to manipulation. But now I had proof. Proof that could bring him back, or break him completely. Either way, I couldn't stay silent anymore. As the sun dipped below the trees, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd find a way to show him the truth. No anger, no begging, just the truth. Because love, real love, wasn't about being chosen every time. Sometimes, it was about being the one who refused to let someone you love live inside a lie. But what I didn't know then was that Olivia was already one step ahead, and the secret she was about to expose would turn my entire world upside down. The next morning, I woke with a weight pressing on my chest, not just the weight of what I had discovered, but the looming sense of inevitability. I knew Olivia wouldn't stay passive forever. That smug, confident voice, the one that laughed when Samuel faltered, it lingered in my mind like a warning. I dressed slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to let panic dictate my movements. Today, I was going to confront her, not with anger, but with truth. With evidence. With the quiet, unwavering force of a mother who had already endured too much. I parked my car a block away from their house. The street was quiet for a Tuesday morning, the sun slicing through the branches in thin golden lines. I clutched the phone with the screenshots of Olivia's messages like a lifeline. They were proof, enough to show Samuel what she had been doing behind his back. And maybe, Just maybe, enough to awaken something in him that still remembered who his real mother was. I stepped onto the driveway, my heels clicking against the concrete in a sound that felt impossibly loud. Olivia was on the porch, sipping coffee, her sunglasses shielding her face. She glanced at me with that familiar smirk, the one I had hated so much, as if she owned the air I was breathing. "Renati," she said, her tone falsely sweet. "What a surprise! Did you come to visit your son? Or just to reminisce about the past?" I didn't answer. I walked past her, straight to the front door. Samuel appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, his hair disheveled, still in his pajamas. His gaze met mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw the boy I had raised staring back. The same boy who had once held my hand after a nightmare, the same boy whose tears I had wiped from his cheeks. He looked away quickly, discomfort written on his face, the invisible chains Olivia had wrapped around him evident in every line of his posture. I spoke first, my voice calm but firm. "Samuel, we need to talk, privately." Olivia's hand shot out, but I ignored it. Samuel hesitated for a moment, long enough to remind me that fear still had a grip on him. Then, almost reluctantly, he followed me to the small sunroom at the back. The smell of freshly brewed coffee followed us, a sharp reminder of normalcy that didn't exist in this house. "Mom," he began, voice low, but I cut him off gently. "Samuel, just listen. I'm not here to yell. I'm here to show you something." I handed him the phone, the messages displayed clearly. He stared, disbelief shadowing his face. What is this?" he whispered. I took a deep breath. "This is the truth, Samuel. Olivia has been controlling you, isolating you, manipulating you, all while convincing you that I don't care about you anymore." "That's a lie." His eyes flicked up at me, confusion battling with anger and shame. He opened the thread, reading each line carefully, each word a needle pricking at the illusion he had been living inside. "Mom, she said that?" His voice broke. She told me you made your choice?" "Yes," I said softly. "And she lied to you, Sam. She told you I abandoned you when all I ever did was love you and try to give you the tools to live independently. She made you doubt yourself, doubt me, doubt everything that was real between us." He slumped into the chair, running his hands over his face. I don't know what to say. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting us." "You were protecting her illusion," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and righteous anger. "She's never cared about your well-being, Samuel. Only about control and appearances. And now, it's time you make your own choice, to see the truth, or to keep living in her story." Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then he looked up, eyes red but clear, and for the first time I saw recognition flicker. Not just of me, but of himself. "Mom, I didn't know. I really didn't know." I reached for his hand. "I know you didn't, that's why I'm here. To give you a chance to choose the real path, the one that's yours." Before he could respond, the door clicked. Olivia stepped inside, a mask of composure firmly in place. "Samuel, what's going on here?" Her voice was sharp now, dangerous. "Why are you listening to her lies?" Samuel stood, his body tense, but his eyes met mine. "No," he said, voice steadier than I expected. "I'm listening to facts. And these are facts." He held up the phone. Olivia's expression faltered, a fraction of doubt passing through her practiced arrogance. That phone isn't proof of anything," she spat. "It's a private conversation." "You can't trust." "Yes, I can," Samuel interrupted, for the first time his voice carrying authority, as if someone else's hand had finally released him. "Because you've been using me. And I see it now. I see everything." I felt a flicker of pride, tinged with sorrow. The boy I had raised was still there, buried under fear and manipulation, but alive and aware. Olivia's face paled. She tried to regain control, to twist words, to remind Samuel of obligations, debts, favors, but it was too late. For the first time, her power over him cracked. "You don't have to say anything more," I said softly to Samuel, squeezing his shoulder. "I just needed you to see, To remember who you really are and who really loves you." He nodded, tears streaming freely now, but not from fear, from clarity, from the first rush of liberation he had felt in years. "Mom, thank you. I don't know how to fix it all, but I want to try." I smiled through my own tears. "We'll take it one step at a time. Together." Behind the sunroom glass, Olivia's shoulders slumped. The mask had completely fallen. I knew the battle wasn't over. She would try to regain control, to manipulate the narrative in other ways. But for the first time, I felt hope. For Samuel. For myself. For the truth finally breaking through. Later that evening, as Samuel and I sat in the quiet of the sunroom, Eleanor called. "Renati, I just had a feeling," she said warmly. "How did it go?" I let out a long, exhausted breath. "She's exposed. Samuel's awake. For the first time in years, he can see clearly." Eleanor's laugh was soft, reassuring. "That's the beginning, my dear. Don't underestimate the power of truth. And never forget, you're stronger than you think." That night, I walked into my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The reflection was not of the frightened, manipulated mother anymore. This was a woman forged through betrayal, pain, and resilience. A woman who could face her own child, reveal the truth, and begin to reclaim the bonds that had been stolen from her. But even as relief washed over me, I knew the real challenge was just beginning. Olivia would not disappear quietly. She would strike back, and the fight for Samuel's heart and our freedom was far from over. The morning air felt unusually crisp as I stepped out of my apartment, the city humming quietly below. Today wasn't just another day of tension and secret glances at my phone. Today was the day I would face Olivia and the truths she had tried to bury for so long. I dressed carefully, selecting a soft gray blazer and a modest blouse, clothing that spoke of dignity, of strength, of a woman who had endured betrayal and was now ready to reclaim her life. My heels clicked against the pavement, echoing through the nearly empty streets, each step grounding me in the resolve I had built over weeks of planning and quiet reflection. Samuel met me outside, his expression a blend of nervousness and determination. He had spent the night pacing, rehearsing what he wanted to say, and yet, when our eyes met, I saw the boy I had raised, wary, yet ready to stand up for the truth. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm ready. I think I've finally understood what's real." I squeezed his hand gently. "That's all I need from you. One step at a time." We arrived at the small downtown cafe where Olivia had requested a family meeting. From the moment we stepped inside, I could feel her energy, the calculated calm, the smile that tried to hide the storm underneath. She had friends with her, 2 women who nodded along at every word, silent enforcers in her little performance. But the moment Samuel and I walked in, something shifted. Her confidence faltered, if only slightly. "Renati, Samuel," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm glad you could make it." She gestured to the empty chairs at the corner table, a calculated distance between us. "We need to talk about the wedding, the house, and everything." I sat without hesitation, placing my phone on the table in plain sight, its screen unlocked and displaying the conversation threads that had exposed her manipulation. Samuel followed suit, his posture straight, his eyes fixed on Olivia. I didn't speak yet. I let the silence hang, letting her anxiety grow just enough to notice. "You're avoiding," she said finally, her voice tighter than before. I don't know why you're making this so difficult." "I'm not avoiding," I said softly, meeting her gaze evenly. "I'm waiting for honesty. For the first time in a long time, I want the truth. And Samuel does too." Her smile was forced now. She leaned forward, fingers clasped tightly. "Truth? You think you've seen the truth? You have no idea what I've done for this family. I've protected Samuel from everything, even from you." Samuel's jaw tightened. "From Mom? Really?" His voice shook, but there was steel in it now. "You've been hiding things from me for years. Manipulating me, making me think I didn't have a choice, making me doubt her love." I felt a surge of pride. For years, I had worried that the poison she had injected into Samuel's mind would never wear off. But here he was, standing up, choosing clarity over the web of lies Olivia had spun so carefully. "You don't understand," Olivia said sharply, leaning closer. "I only did what was necessary. You don't know the consequences of the choices you make." "Necessary?" I repeated, voice calm but cutting. "Manipulation, isolation, threats, hiding your true intentions? That's what you call necessary? For how long did you plan this, Olivia? How long did you believe you could control Samuel and, by extension, my life?" Her eyes darted to Samuel as if trying to find an ally, but he didn't move. The spell was broken. The barrier she had maintained for so long was crumbling. She began, faltering, but Samuel cut her off. "I don't need your explanation. I need the truth. And I've seen it." Her composure cracked completely. She leaned back, her hands shaking slightly, her gaze darting around the cafe. Her friend sat rigidly, unsure but unwilling to intervene. For the first time, I saw fear in Olivia's eyes. Not of me, but of exposure. Of losing control. "You've lied to everyone," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. "You've lied to Samuel. You've lied about finances, about feelings, about my intentions. I know everything, Olivia. Every message, every manipulation, every attempt to twist reality. It ends now." Samuel took a deep breath, finally finding his voice fully. "Mom didn't abandon me. She didn't manipulate me. She's loved me my entire life. Everything you said about her not caring, it was a lie. And now I see it." The cafe felt smaller suddenly, the hum of early morning patrons fading into the background. Olivia's face paled as Samuel held up the messages she had sent him, the evidence undeniable. Her fingers twitched, and then finally she spoke, voice barely a whisper. "This isn't real. You're twisting my words. You're both—" "Enough," I said, standing slowly. The weight of 71 years of betrayal, of patience and endurance pressed into my words. "Samuel and I will no longer allow you to control our reality. We are done being manipulated. We are done living in the shadow of your lies." She gasped as if struck. I could see the old Olivia, the one who thrived on control, crumbling before our eyes. But the moment was fleeting. She recovered quickly, her tone sharpening, venom creeping back. "You think this changes everything? That I'll just walk away? You don't understand what's at stake. Samuel, think about what she's doing. Think about the family we've built." Samuel's face hardened. "Family isn't built on lies, Olivia. It isn't built on fear. It's built on respect, trust, and love. Things you have never offered me, or Mom, and I refuse to be part of your manipulations any longer." Her lips trembled, but she didn't respond. The cafe felt like a courtroom now, each word hanging in the air. Every witness, even the unsuspecting patrons, part of the silent jury. Samuel and I had the truth, and that truth was stronger than any fear she could muster. I reached for Samuel's hand, gripping it tightly. "We leave this place with our dignity intact," I said softly. "No more games, no more illusions. Today marks the end of their control over us." She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. "This isn't over," she hissed. But the conviction in our stance was a wall she couldn't break. "You'll see. You'll regret this. You think you've won, but—" Samuel's eyes blazed. "No, Olivia. I see clearly now, and there's nothing you can do to undo that." We left the cafe together, the cool morning air washing over us. Samuel walked beside me, tall, confident, no longer a boy shadowed by manipulation. I felt the old fear of loss creeping in, yes, but stronger still was a surge of hope. For the first time in years, we had reclaimed something sacred, the truth. Later that afternoon, I sat with Eleanor in my apartment, recounting the confrontation. She listened, nodding, her expression grave but proud. "Renati, you've done something remarkable. You've broken the chains of manipulation, not with anger, but with clarity and courage. That's how battles are won." I smiled faintly, exhaustion settling in. "I know the fight isn't over. Olivia will try again, in different ways, subtle ways. But for now, Samuel knows the truth. That's what matters." Eleanor reached out, taking my hand. "And you have an army behind you. Friends, witnesses, supporters. You are not alone. You never were." As I looked out the window, the city stretching endlessly before me, I realized the depth of what had changed. Samuel was awake. Olivia's reign of manipulation was exposed. And I, after decades of fear, of silent compliance, of putting others above myself, was finally standing fully in my own power. That night, I penned a note to my subscribers, to everyone who had followed this journey on my channel. No one has the right to manipulate your life or your love. Recognize the signs, reclaim your truth, and stand firm. Your dignity and freedom are worth fighting for. I ended the note with a question, a call to action. If you were in my place, how would you reclaim control over the people who tried to take your life from you? Share your story in the comments, and let's build a community of strength, wisdom, and support. And as I turned off the light and lay in bed, I felt a profound sense of calm, not because the storm had passed, it hadn't, but because I had finally discovered the unshakable truth that courage, clarity, and love could cut through even the thickest webs of deceit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Olivia's attempts to manipulate the narrative might continue. But tonight, Samuel and I had won the most important battle. We had reclaimed our reality, and with it, the promise of a future free from lies and fear. The morning of Olivia's so-called final discussion arrived with an eerie calm. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with possibilities of what she might attempt next. Samuel sat across from me at the breakfast table, quietly eating his toast, his presence both grounding and reassuring. The city outside our window was just beginning to wake, cars and buses crawling along the streets, oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold in our lives. Today, I knew, would be a pivotal day. One way or another, Olivia would attempt one last time to assert control, to twist the truth, and to reclaim the dominance she had lost. We had chosen a neutral location, a small community center halfway between our apartment and Olivia's home. The space was bright and airy, filled with folding chairs and long tables. It had been booked under the guise of a family mediation session, though both Samuel and I suspected that Olivia's idea of mediation would involve one-sided accusations and theatrical displays. I arrived early, as usual, reviewing my notes, the documents, and the messages that exposed her manipulation. Samuel joined me a few minutes later, his hands slightly shaking but his eyes clear, a mirror of my own resolve. When Olivia arrived, she was impeccably dressed, as if preparing for a stage performance. Her assistants flanked her, carrying folders and notebooks, ready to provide silent support, ready to validate whatever lies she had prepared. But the moment our eyes met, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her otherwise confident mask. Samuel and I had exposed enough cracks. She was no longer the untouchable puppeteer she once believed herself to be. "Renedy, Samuel," she began, her tone almost syrupy. "Thank you for agreeing to come today. I truly hope we can resolve this in a peaceful, reasonable manner." I smiled politely, keeping my voice calm. "I'm here for the truth, Olivia. Samuel is here for the truth, and nothing else matters." She nodded once, her eyes narrowing. "Very well. Let's begin." The first hour unfolded predictably. Olivia spoke at length, recounting what she called my erratic behavior, citing minor disagreements as evidence of instability. She pointed to the installation of home security cameras, framing them as a sign of paranoia. She brought up casual comments Samuel and I had made during family gatherings, twisting them into evidence of alienation and manipulation. Her assistants corroborated each claim, nodding in synchronization as if rehearsed. I listened quietly, letting her words hang in the air. Every accusation was already documented, every misinterpretation logged. I allowed the theatrics to play out, knowing that Samuel and I had the truth on our side. When she finished, I finally stood, my spine straight, my voice calm but unwavering. "Olivia," I said, addressing her directly, "everything you've just said has already been documented and refuted. The security cameras were installed for protection after repeated unauthorized visits to my home. The disagreements you mentioned were never about family, but about financial boundaries you refused to respect. And the statements about Samuel? You've twisted every word he said to make it appear I'm unreasonable. That is not truth. That is manipulation. The room fell silent, the weight of my words lingering. Even Olivia's assistants shifted uncomfortably. Samuel leaned forward, his eyes blazing. Mom is telling the truth, he said firmly. I've seen the messages, the texts, the evidence. You've tried to control me, to manipulate her, to make me doubt my own family. I won't allow that anymore. Olivia's face tightened. She tried to interject, but I raised my hand slightly. Wait, let me finish. I turned to the mediator, a kind-faced woman who had been silently observing. Everything you've heard from Olivia today has been carefully orchestrated to paint me as unstable. I am 71 years old. I manage my own finances. I drive my car. I maintain social relationships. And I have undergone recent cognitive evaluations that confirm my mental competence. I am not being manipulated. I am not in danger. And I am certainly not incapable of making decisions for myself. The mediator nodded, jotting notes quickly. I see, she said softly. And you have documentation to support these statements? Yes, I replied, holding up the folder I had carried. Every single interaction, every financial transaction, every attempt at coercion has been recorded. This includes messages, bank statements, witnesses' testimonies, and expert evaluations. For the first time that morning, Olivia's composure faltered visibly. She leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. This isn't fair. You've twisted everything. Samuel, can't you see she's misrepresenting? Samuel's expression was resolute. No, Olivia. I see everything clearly now. You lied to me. You lied to Mom. I won't let you do this anymore. The mediator interjected gently. Samuel, please speak slowly and clearly for the record. He nodded. I've spent years believing my mother was manipulative because of what Olivia told me. But I've seen the truth. The texts, the financial records, and my own experiences show otherwise. Mom has always acted responsibly, with love and care. Olivia's version of events is false, fabricated, and intended to manipulate both of us for her own benefit. There was a stir among the observers in the room. A few whispered quietly to one another, clearly shaken by the revelations. Olivia's face went pale, her mask of confidence cracking under the weight of Samuel's testimony and the irrefutable evidence. Renati, Olivia said finally, her voice low and trembling. You don't understand. I only wanted to protect Samuel. I only wanted what's best for him. For all of us. I shook my head slowly. No, Olivia. You wanted control. You wanted power over our lives. Protection looks like honesty, support, and respect, not coercion, lies, and financial manipulation. The next hour was a blur of confrontation, evidence presentation, and witness testimony. Eleanor, my stalwart friend, recounted the times Olivia had attempted to isolate me, to make me doubt my own judgment. My neighbors described the break-ins and intrusions into my home. The morning of Olivia's so-called final discussion arrived with an eerie calm. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with possibilities of what she might attempt next. Samuel sat across from me at the breakfast table, quietly eating his toast, his presence both grounding and reassuring. The city outside our window was just beginning to wake, cars and buses crawling along the streets, oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold in our lives. Today, I knew, would be a pivotal day. One way or another, Olivia would attempt one last time to assert control, to twist the truth, and to reclaim the dominance she had lost. We had chosen a neutral location, a small community center halfway between our apartment and Olivia's home. The space was bright and airy, filled with folding chairs and long tables. It had been booked under the guise of a family mediation session, though both Samuel and I suspected that Olivia's idea of mediation would involve one-sided accusations and theatrical displays. I arrived early, as usual, reviewing my notes, the documents, and the messages that exposed her manipulation. Samuel joined me a few minutes later, his hands slightly shaking but his eyes clear, a mirror of my own resolve. When Olivia arrived, she was impeccably dressed, as if preparing for a stage performance. Her assistants flanked her, carrying folders and notebooks, ready to provide silent support, ready to validate whatever lies she had prepared. But the moment our eyes met, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her otherwise confident mask. Samuel and I had exposed enough cracks. She was no longer the untouchable puppeteer she once believed herself to be. "Renedy, Samuel," she began, her tone almost syrupy. "Thank you for agreeing to come today. I truly hope we can resolve this in a peaceful, reasonable manner." I smiled politely, keeping my voice calm. "I'm here for the truth, Olivia. Samuel is here for the truth. And nothing else matters." She nodded once, her eyes narrowing. "Very well. Let's begin." The first hour unfolded predictably. Olivia spoke at length, recounting what she called my erratic behavior, citing minor disagreements as evidence of instability. She pointed to the installation of home security cameras, framing them as a sign of paranoia. She brought up casual comments Samuel and I had made during family gatherings, twisting them into evidence of alienation and manipulation. Her assistants corroborated each claim, nodding in synchronization as if rehearsed. I listened quietly, letting her words hang in the air. Every accusation was already documented, every misinterpretation logged. I allowed the theatrics to play out, knowing that Samuel and I had the truth on our side. When she finished, I finally stood, my spine straight, my voice calm but unwavering. "Olivia," I said, addressing her directly, "everything you've just said has already been documented and refuted. The security cameras were installed for protection after repeated unauthorized visits to my home. The disagreements you mentioned were never about family, but about financial boundaries you refused to respect. And the statements about Samuel? You've twisted every word he said to make it appear I'm unreasonable. That is not truth. That is manipulation." The room fell silent, the weight of my words lingering. Even Olivia's assistants shifted uncomfortably. Samuel leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "Mom is telling the truth," he said firmly. "I've seen the messages, the texts, the evidence. You've tried to control me, to manipulate her, to make me doubt my own family. I won't allow that anymore." Olivia's face tightened. She tried to interject, but I raised my hand slightly. "Wait, let me finish." I turned to the mediator, a kind-faced woman who had been silently observing. "Everything you've heard from Olivia today has been carefully orchestrated to paint me as unstable. I am 71 years old. I manage my own finances. I drive my car. I maintain social relationships. And I have undergone recent cognitive evaluations that confirm my mental competence. I am not being manipulated. I am not in danger. And I am certainly not incapable of making decisions for myself." The mediator nodded, jotting notes quickly. "I see," she said softly. "And you have documentation to support these statements?" "Yes," I replied, holding up the folder I had carried. "Every single interaction, every financial transaction, every attempt at coercion has been recorded. This includes messages, bank statements, witnesses' testimonies, and expert evaluations." For the first time that morning, Olivia's composure faltered visibly. She leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "This isn't fair. You've twisted everything. Samuel, can't you see she's misrepresenting?" Samuel's expression was resolute. "No, Olivia. I see everything clearly now. You lied to me. You lied to Mom. I won't let you do this anymore." The mediator interjected gently. "Samuel, please speak slowly and clearly for the record." He nodded. "I've spent years believing my mother was manipulative because of what Olivia told me. But I've seen the truth. The texts, the financial records, and my own experiences show otherwise. Mom has always acted responsibly, with love and care. Olivia's version of events is false, fabricated, and intended to manipulate both of us for her own benefit." There was a stir among the observers in the room. A few whispered quietly to one another, clearly shaken by the revelations. Olivia's face went pale, her mask of confidence cracking under the weight of Samuel's testimony and the irrefutable evidence. "Renedy," Olivia said finally, her voice low and trembling, "you don't understand. I only wanted to protect Samuel. I only wanted what's best for him. For all of us. I shook my head slowly. No, Olivia. You wanted control. You wanted power over our lives. Protection looks like honesty, support, and respect, not coercion, lies, and financial manipulation. The next hour was a blur of confrontation, evidence presentation, and witness testimony. Eleanor, my stalwart friend, recounted the times Olivia had attempted to isolate me, to make me doubt my own judgment. My neighbors described the break-ins and intrusions into my home. Samuel's friends corroborated the messages and events that had been kept from me for so long. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Olivia's manipulation. By the time the final witness, Dr. Moore, presented the results of my cognitive evaluations, Olivia's attempts at distortion had completely collapsed. The psychologist's detailed explanation of my mental competence left no room for doubt. Every claim Olivia had made about paranoia, confusion, or erratic behavior was demonstrably false. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief as I watched the culmination of years of deception unravel in front of me. Olivia's expression shifted from indignation to desperation, and finally, to resignation. She realized that her grip on our lives had been broken, and that no performance, no manipulation, could reverse what had been exposed today. Samuel and I left the center together, the crisp afternoon air filling our lungs. For the first time, there was a sense of liberation in our steps. The shadow that had hung over our lives, Olivia's constant manipulation, the threat of lies, and the psychological games, had finally lifted. That evening, Eleanor organized a small gathering at her home. Friends and allies came, sharing stories of resilience and triumph. There was laughter, tears, and a profound sense of community. I realized that my life, once dominated by fear and manipulation, was now mine to reclaim. I could make choices freely, love openly, and live authentically. I looked out at the city skyline from Eleanor's balcony, the lights twinkling like stars brought to earth. "Samuel," I said softly, "we've endured a lot, haven't we?" "Yes, Mom," he replied, taking my hand. "But we've survived and we've learned. I see clearly now, and I won't forget it." As night fell, I wrote a message to my subscribers, urging them to recognize manipulation, to document evidence, and to stand firm in their truths. No one should ever be made to feel like they are powerless in their own life. Protect yourself, seek clarity, and surround yourself with those who support your freedom and dignity. The final triumph and rebirth, how Renati finally claims her life and freedom. The morning sun spilled golden light across my apartment, casting long shadows on the floor and filling my space with warmth I hadn't felt in years. After the grueling confrontation with Olivia and the public exposure of her manipulations, I woke up feeling lighter, freer, as if a weight that had been pressing on me for decades had finally lifted. The world outside continued at its usual pace, cars honking, neighbors chatting, the city alive with its chaos. But inside me, there was serenity, a deep, quiet sense of victory. Samuel was already awake, seated at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee. He smiled when he saw me enter. "Morning, Mom," he said softly. No hesitation, no lingering tension, just the warmth of family finally real. I sat down across from him, taking in the small victories we had won together. Our bond had strengthened through the fires of manipulation, lies, and betrayal. And now, for the first time in decades, I felt truly respected by my son. Not as a source of income, but as a person worthy of love and autonomy. After breakfast, I went to my study, where stacks of files, documents, and letters had accumulated over the years. Each represented a battle fought, a deception uncovered, a claim disproved. Today, however, they no longer represented fear or burden. They were proof. Proof of my strength, of my clarity, of the life I had fought to protect. I carefully organized the documents, filing away each piece of evidence, knowing that they had served their purpose. They were no longer chains. They were trophies of survival. The day passed quietly, and I found myself reflecting on the events that had brought me here. I remembered Eleanor's words, "Freedom isn't given, Renati. It's claimed." Those words had echoed through my mind during every confrontation, every legal challenge, every sleepless night. And now I understood fully. Freedom isn't merely the absence of oppression, it is the presence of choice, the ability to live for oneself without fear, without guilt, and without manipulation. By late afternoon, I decided it was time to take a step I had postponed for years. I walked to the local charity office where I had planned to contribute a portion of my savings. The organization protected elderly individuals from family exploitation, a cause deeply personal now, a mission born from my own painful experiences. As I handed over the donation, the director smiled warmly. "Your generosity will make a real difference," she said. And I realized, in that moment, that my wealth was finally serving a purpose beyond appeasing those who had never truly cared for me. It was empowering others, ensuring protection and justice where it was most needed. Returning home, I found Samuel in the living room, unpacking boxes of art supplies. Painting had become my sanctuary over the past weeks, a way to express the emotions that words often failed to capture. He watched as I set up my easel near the window, sunlight streaming across the blank canvas. "I've missed this," I admitted, holding the brush carefully, almost reverently. "I've missed feeling like myself." Samuel nodded, understanding more than I could put into words. "You deserve this, Mom. You deserve every bit of it." I began to paint, delicate strokes of vibrant colors, flowers blooming on the canvas, symbols of growth, resilience, and rebirth. Each stroke carried away a fragment of the fear, anger, and sadness I had carried for decades. The flowers were more than art. They were a declaration. I was here. I was free. I was alive on my own terms. As the evening approached, Eleanor arrived with a small gathering of our friends, the women who had stood by me through thick and thin. We shared dinner, laughter, and stories, celebrating not just the legal victory, but the emotional liberation we had achieved together. Elfrida, always wise, raised her glass. "Renati, you didn't just win back your money," she said. "You reclaimed your life, your dignity, your right to be yourself. That is something no one can ever take away." The night ended with quiet reflection on my balcony, looking out over the city lights. The stars above seemed brighter, more alive than ever before. I thought of the woman I had been a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing love could be bought with money. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone unbreakable, someone who had faced betrayal, humiliation, and deceit, and emerged stronger, wiser, and free. I knew the path forward would not be without challenges. Olivia and those who had tried to control my life would never fully disappear from my mind. But their power over me had ended. For the first time, I could make choices for myself, to travel, to create, to give, to love, without guilt or fear. The city, once overwhelming and indifferent, now seemed full of possibilities. Weeks later, I moved to a beautiful new apartment near the city center, bright and modern, filled with sunlight and life. I donated half of my fortune to organizations, protecting the elderly, and with the other half, I began to live fully. I traveled through Europe, explored museums and galleries, and immersed myself in painting and creative pursuits I had long abandoned. Each experience was a reminder that life, even after betrayal, can hold beauty, joy, and freedom. I never heard from Samuel and Olivia again. Occasionally, I received secondhand updates that they had downsized, that Olivia had taken a job for the first time in years, that Samuel was learning the hard way about independence and responsibility. Perhaps they had begun to understand the lessons I had tried to teach them with money, patience, and love, lessons that could not be bought. Some nights, when I sit on my balcony and watch the stars, I think about the journey I've endured. The humiliation, the betrayal, the emotional manipulation, all of it has been transformed into wisdom, resilience, and power. I am no longer defined by the expectations or greed of others. I am defined by my choices, my freedom, and the love I have for myself. For those watching and listening, I share my story not to boast, but to empower. If you find yourself in a position where those you trust seek to control or manipulate you, know this: your autonomy, dignity, and freedom are worth protecting. Document your experiences. Seek support from allies and professionals. And most importantly, trust in your own clarity and strength. My name is Renati. I am 72 years old. I have reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future. I am free, independent, and fully in control of my choices. To those watching this story, protect yourself, cherish your autonomy, and never let anyone convince you that your life belongs to them. If my journey inspires you, I invite you to like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. Let us create a community of strength, wisdom, and empowerment, where stories like mine can help others recognize their own power and claim their freedom. Remember, true love cannot be bought, and freedom is never too expensive. Protect it, nurture it, and live fully. Like, subscribe, and share your story. Your voice matters, and your freedom matters even more.